Okay, in this tutorial, we're going to create an Amazon Web Services Kinesis Firehose stream, and we're going to stream our data to an S3 bucket. The business case that we're going to simulate is we have a temperature gauging station in each state, and they stream data continuously. The data could be Fahrenheit or it could be Celsius. But what we need to do is we need to have that data standardized as Kelvin. So we're going to create a Kinesis Firehose stream that streams the data to an S3 bucket, but we're going to create a transformation function as a Python function in Lambda that transforms that data, converts it from either Celsius or Fahrenheit to Kelvin. So let's begin by creating our Firehose stream. So I have all this in recently visited, but an easy way to find what you need is to just start typing it in. If you've never used Amazon Kinesis before, it's going to say get started. And we're going to choose create streaming data with Kinesis Firehose delivery stream. So let's click create delivery stream. Okay, we're going to name it temperature stream. We're going to choose our source. Now your source could be another Kinesis data stream or a direct put or other root sources. We're going to choose that one because we're going to directly input our data via the command, the AWS CLI command line. We're not going to enable encryption. We're not going to enable encryption. So we don't need to click that. So click next. And although we're going to transform our records with AWS Lambda, but we're not going to do that yet. So let's go ahead and leave that disabled. We're also not going to convert the record format. Okay, and for our destination, you can see there's several different destinations. We're just going to select Amazon S3. And you could either choose a pre-existing bucket or create a new one. We're going to create a new one. We're going to call it temperature bucket 1, 2, 3, and I just added that 1, 2, 3 because remember, S3 buckets need to be uniquely named across all of Amazon. And I've created our bucket, and then I'm going to go ahead and click next. And I'm going to change our buffer size and interval just to make it smaller so it's easier for us. That's not required. You could change it, well, you can see the values between 1 and 128 megabyte. You could change it between 60 and 900 seconds. We're not going to enable compression nor encryption in our S3 bucket. And we're going to leave error logging on because we're actually going to introduce an error in our Lambda function just so we can see just so we can practice error handling. Now we need to create our IAM role, so we're going to create a new one. It's going to pop up with a default role name. We're going to go ahead and click allow. Oh, let's view the policy document. So the policy document is going to give us, permissions to work with Glue, S3, and other, and Lambda. So so let's go ahead and click allow. But what we're going to do, just for the sake of this tutorial, we're going to be really lazy. And we are actually going to delete that inline policy. And we're going to add our own. So we're going to worry about Lambda. Let's go ahead, Lambda full. So we're going to give it full access to Lambda, S3 full. And Kinesis. Let's do Firehose. Okay, so we're in full access to Firehose. Okay, so now we have full access to Lambda, S3, Kinesis Firehose. Again, this is not required. Moreover, it's not recommended, but we're being lazy because we want to make sure that we don't have any problems as we go through the tutorial. And if you got these full access, we won't have problems. Okay, let's return to our Firehose and let's click next. Now we can review it. Our temperature or our delivery stream name is temperature stream. direct put or other sources. We're not transforming the records. We're outputting our record to a S3 bucket named temperature bucket 123, and we have our Firehose delivery role. We have no compression or encryption. So now we click create delivery stream, and after a couple minutes, it should say active. You can just keep refreshing your stream until then, or excuse me, your screen until then. So the next step is to wait until it says active. Okay, after the status is active, let's go ahead and click on temperature stream. And now we have the details of our stream, but go ahead and go up here to test with demo data. Click start sending demo data. Now we can send demo data because we don't have any type of transformation occurring. So it's not expecting data in any sort of format. So we're just inputting data and then we're writing it to the S3 bucket. So we're not really worried about what the format of the data is. Just want to test to make sure everything's working. Okay, let's click stop sending demo data, and then let's go to the S3 bucket. Okay, in reality, you should not have data appearing this quickly. You probably have to wait a few minutes, but I had already sent it in a previous edit that I edited out of this. So let's just pretend like it was instantaneous. Okay, there's our data. Click on it, and I'm going to click download as, save link as, and I'm just going to do data text, even though it's JSON. I'm just doing this so I can just click once and have it open. And there's our data. All right, so now let's test with some external data. Let's click here. We're going to click with some external data. So I'm using something called git bash. The reason I'm doing that is because we are sending a JSON record and we have to escape. If you look, you see these, we have to escape these double quotes. And I'll be darned if I could get it to work correctly in command, in the command prompt, or in PowerShell. And so I'm using git bash, which actually uses Unix escaping, and it works just fine. So now I'm also assuming you have the AWS CLI installed and you have your proper credentials, so it's configured with your credentials so that it can communicate with Amazon Web Services and authenticate you. So we're going to use the Firehose put record command, our delivery stream, which was temperature stream. Now remember that records are all commands, all information sent to the API, to AWS's APIs, is JSON REST data. But what this is allowing us, this record equals data, this is allowing us a shortcut. So this command as a whole is going to put all the other stuff in there that we need, and all we need to specify is the actual data. And in this case, it's a JSON record, station, and temperature. So let's go ahead and send it. Okay, so let's send another record. And I'm just sending a few records just to get this sucker working. Okay, so we've sent a few records. So now if we return to this, we should, okay, this is actually not what we just did. This record that just appeared was from our previous stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and delete both of those. And eventually there's going to be a file that appears. So until then, we're just going to wait, click this, refresh a couple times, and wait for the records to get through the stream and to make it to this bucket. Okay, so the records have finally made it to the S3 bucket. So let's go ahead and look at them. Download as, save link as, and of course I'm just doing this for convenience. And we open it, and voila, there's our records. So 82.5, 99, So there's our JSON records that were written to the database. However, notice that they're not in a standard format. So some are Fahrenheit, some are Celsius. We want to convert them to Kelvin. So the next step is going to be to write the Lambda function in Python that transforms the temperature to a standardized Kelvin unit of measure. Okay, so now we're going to start our Python, developing our Python Lambda function, and we're going to do that in a software called PyCharm. Now I'm assuming you have the AWS Toolkit installed and that you also have the AWS SAM CLI installed and properly configured, and that you have Docker installed and properly configured. All three of those are required in order to do this. We're going to create a new project, AWS Serverless Application. We're going to name it temperature. Let's just name it temperature conversion. And there's not very much of a choice there, but we're going to leave it as SAM Hello World. I'm changing it to Python 3.8. Different ones you can use you can use different ones, but that's what I'm changing it to. Clicking create. And it's going to take a minute to create everything we need to have created. So it's going to create our virtual environment and just do a bunch of junk. So while we're doing that, it's really easy. It was really easy. It's really easy to get set up in Windows or on a Mac. In Linux, that's a whole nother story. It's much more difficult. But I'm assuming if you're using Linux, you probably are able to get Python set up and configured correctly. When this comes up, just say no. You don't want to create it from existing sources instead. Okay. It's going to get it all set up for us. What it creates is a Hello World project. Yeah, we got to be patient. While we're waiting, while it's generating the SAM template and all that, notice down here at the bottom it says AWS no credentials selected. Let's go ahead and select our region. And let's select our default profile credentials. All right, now everything should be created. Okay, so now everything should be created. We have our Hello World folder, our Python, our Lambda function, which there's not much there. But what we don't want this. We want this to be called temperature conversion. So let's go ahead and right click, refactor, rename, temperature conversion. Well, we don't need an underscore. I'm just doing that. Refactor. It's going to find all the refactoring. We're going to do the refactor. Close this. However, there's one other thing we need to do. So we also need to go to our SAM template. And you'll notice our SAM template has all kinds of Hello World stuff in it. So let's change that to temperature conversion. Temperature conversion. Let's skip that. Let's skip that. Let's just change this. Temperature conversion Lambda function. We got to be sure to change this. Okay, yeah, sorry. Temperature conversion. Let's change this. Temperature conversion function. And we want to change this. Temperature conversion function. Temperature conversion and temperature. Now, you notice we skipped something. We skipped events, hello world, so the API. So recall that there is so you have Lambda functions, but there's also the AWS API, which allows you to send or to communicate with your Lambda functions via REST. Well, we're not going to do that. We don't need that. So we're going to go ahead and just delete that. We're going to delete the whole thing. So we're not going to create, remember this is a SAM template. We're not going to create any of that. We're also not going to create our API. So I guess I should back up. Let me back up. Hold on. I got this mixed up. This is the event that fires. So the API has an event that fires our Lambda function. Well, we're not creating any of that. So we're going to do that all ourselves. Same with the API. We don't need an API. So for our outputs, for our resources, we have a temperature conversion function, which is a Lambda function, and it's in Python 3.8. And for our outputs, we have a temperature conversion Lambda function, and we have a role, but we're not creating anything in the API. That's the AWS API that sits on top of Lambda. Okay, so now we've changed everything. Let's see. So we've changed the template. So let's close this template. Let's double check real quick. Temperature conversion function and temperature conversion function, temperature conversion role, temperature conversion function. Okay, so everything should be good. Let's go over here. This is our runtime that we're going to use to test with. And let's do edit configurations for some reason or other. Okay, so we're going to change the name of this to temperature conversion. Now, if you're following along, sometimes this is this from template change does not get reflected immediately, and you might need to mess around with it a bit. But there you go. So temperature conversion function. And the next thing, we need to have some kind of input for our test. We're going to choose test. And for now, we're just going to leave the input as hello world. We're going to click OK. And now we're going to test it. So down here you can see running SAM build. It's doing all this locally. And it's using Docker and the SAM CLI and all that good stuff behind the scenes. So it actually does a lot of work behind the scenes for us. But it's not, it's all stuff you could do by hand if you're a masochist. And there we go. So it sent the message and it got back hello world. So it invoked the function and got back hello world. Okay, so now the next thing is going to be to change this to the actual conversion method or conversion function that we want to write. Okay, so now we want to change the actual Lambda function. I am just going to cut and paste. We're not really going to focus on the Python syntax. What we've done is we've created a Lambda function that takes records. The records are the data is base 64 encoded, so we have to decode it. So we're decoding, we're going through each record, and each record we're going to decode the base 64, and then we're going to load it as JSON, and what we are then going to do is we're going to look to see if it has an uppercase F, an F period, and if it does, then we're going to consider it Fahrenheit, otherwise we're going to consider it Celsius. Now notice this is in error. This is me being a Java programmer by design and not really much of a Python programmer. This is actually an error, but we're going to leave this for now because my sensibility would be, oh well, if it doesn't find it, it's 0, but or -1. Well, that's not the case. It's actually an error. So then we just convert it to Kelvin, and then we output the record. And after we output the record, well, we output the record, we encode the data back as base 64. And that's how this function works. Okay, so let's go ahead and oh, I also should mention, yeah, we're expecting JSON data. So let's go ahead and change this. We're expecting a temperature JSON field. So we're going to go to this, we're going to click Edit Configuration. We're going to go back to this. Now remember the event template it took was Hello World? Well, guess what we're going to change it to now? Firehose. So Kinesis Firehose. Okay, so here you go. So remember how we sent data from the command line, and I said, oh, well, there was a shortcut where all we had to do was enter the data, and everything else, it handled everything else. Well, it handled all of this for us, this other stuff, as well as the base 64 encoding for us. But here it does not. So let's leave this data as is. Let's click Apply. Let's click OK. And now let's click Run. And it's going to give us an error, actually. That was dumb of me. It's going to give us an error because it's not in the formatting we were expecting. But let's go ahead and just make an error. Okay, that's fine. So now what we want to do now is we need to send some data into, we need to get some test data for this function. To do that, we're going to go to a website called base64 encode, and that'll be the next step. Okay, we also need to change the timeout. I forgot to change the timeout. So here the timeout is set for 3 seconds. But we need to change this to 60 seconds, which is the default timeout for Kinesis Firehose. So we changed that. So now that we're done with that, we want to go ahead and deploy this. So we right-click, Deploy Serverless Application. We're going to call it Temperature Conversion. There's no necessary reason for underscores. I'm just doing that. We're going to create a new bucket. That's an old bucket. So from a previous run through the tutorial, we're going to call it Temperature Conversion Stack 1, 2, 3, 4. And we'll delete that other one later. Okay. So now we're going to click Deploy. It doesn't take underscores. Sorry about that. Temperature conversion stack. And it's going to go through and it's going to run. Notice it's running all these SAM commands to actually deploy our application for us. So behind the scenes, it's using Docker and the SAM CLI. Okay, so it should be pretty quick because we don't have a lot of resources. I'm going to go ahead and wait for it. Okay, after it's done creating your stack, let's go ahead and go to Amazon Web Services, and we're going to go to CloudFormation. And here you go. Here's our temperature conversion stack, and it says Create Complete. You have all kinds of different tabs you can look through if you want. Go to Resources. There's our function. Let's open our Lambda function. Notice it's telling us not to mess with it because you don't want to mess with it because it's part of a CloudFormation thing. Oops, don't know what I did there. So let's scroll down. There's the source code for our Python function. And so now that we're good to go with that, we're believe that it was created. Let's go ahead and go to Kinesis. Go to our Firehose delivery stream. Click Edit because we want to add it. So now let's scroll down. Note that our transform source records with AWS we want to enable it. And we're going to choose our Lambda function, which is the one we just created. We want the latest version. Buffer size, buffer interval. So we're good to go there. Now it's telling us, it's warning us about that something has changed in this. So let's go ahead and update our IAM role. And let's go ahead and click Allow. But I want to show you something. Really what all this stuff is, what it's telling us that we kind of have a funky policy set up, because it tries to set up the correct policies in line with the appropriate access levels. But like I said, and that's how you should be working with this, but like I said, I'm just being lazy and I'm making darn sure everything works by giving everything full access. Okay, so let's go ahead. We've done that. Now we can close that, and now we can go save. Okay, so now let's go ahead and go to we've saved it. So let's go to our S3 bucket. And it's empty. I went ahead and deleted stuff off camera. So it's an empty bucket right now, but let's go ahead and go back to git bash and send a few records. I'm going to send only Fahrenheit. Well, no, I'm going to send both. I'm going to send, there's a Fahrenheit record. Actually, no, I'm going to just send the Fahrenheit records first. Okay, so I've sent a couple Fahrenheit records. So now we want to wait for them to be delivered to the bucket. Okay, so the data is now in the bucket. So let's go ahead and go down the bucket hierarchy here, folder hierarchy, get to our data. And oops. Oh, there we go. Okay, I'm going to click download as. Of course, this is just me being, lazy for the purpose of the tutorial. Save link as. I'm just going to call it data text. And let's open it. And boom, there we go. There's our records converted, just as we expected. So we're done, right? It all works. Well, we didn't do any Celsius data, so let's see something here. Let's go up a level. Actually, no, let's go all the way up. So what we're going to do is we're now going to send some Celsius data. Let's see what happens. All right, so we sent some data. We sent 2 Celsius records, 1 Fahrenheit. Okay, so I am going to refresh this level. I already know it's going to create an error, so I know that something's going to appear at this level. Okay, after hitting refresh a few times, we can see that we have something called processing failed here, a folder. Let's go ahead and look, see what happened. Okay, download as. Attempts made for arrival timestamp, error code. So the Lambda function was successfully invoked, but it returned an error result. But we have no idea what that error result is. So we know that the Lambda function's an error. So, okay, so we can go ahead and let's go to our Kinesis Firehose. Actually, no, let's go to our Lambda function, services, Lambda. And there's our function. And let's click on monitoring. And we're going to scroll down to our log. And we're going to go to our most recent invocation, because obviously that's the one. And we're going to look. So Fahrenheit looks fine. Fahrenheit. Okay, here we go. Now we're on Celsius. So notice that our debugging is being written to this log. So that's helpful. Error. Substring not found in traceback. Is Fahrenheit equals Boolean upper index Fahrenheit greater than 0? Okay, so we found our error. There we go, right there. Substring not found. So the thing is, if you know Python, which I kind of do, but my first language is Java. But as you can see, what we've got here. Sorry, I'm screwing around here. I'm sorry, I'm getting lost here. Okay, let's go back to the function. And so if you know anything about Python, then you know that this is wrong. My Java sensibility got me wrong. Now, you could be tempted to change it here, and we could change it here if we wanted to. But if we did that, then we would mess up our whole stack, and we would have a CM problem because the version here would be different than the version here. So let's go ahead and just replace that with the correct function. So let's go to our app.py, and let's change this index with the correct function. Okay, and the correct function that we want, rather than index, is find. There's a function called find. So now we want the find function. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's save this. And we could test it, but we're going to be lazy here. We're going to go to the template, right-click on the template, and we're going to do deploy serverless application. We're going to update the stack. So we're just going to click deploy, and it's going to do everything it needs to do to update the stack. And we're just going to wait for it to complete. And the reason we're doing it here is because for change management, we obviously don't want to do it in their function on AWS. We want to do it here in the command line. Okay, after it's done updating the stack, we should go back to AWS. Just to make sure that it did. Whoops. And so let's go to the right spot. Let's just refresh this page. It should work. Let's go down. There we go, find. Of course, we would want to have tested all this locally first, but we're just doing this, to save time. We don't need to do it. All right, so now let's go ahead and go back to our S3 bucket. Temperature bucket. And I'm going to delete this just so we can stay at this top level. All right, so now let's send this data again. Whoops, that was Fahrenheit. Let's send to Celsius. Let's send a couple more Celsius. Whoops, that was the same one. Okay, there was a different one. All right, so we sent some data. Now let's wait and see what happens. Let's wait. It should be written to the folder, to the bucket rather. And we're going to wait until it gets written to the bucket. Okay, after hitting refresh a few times, our data finally arrives. And this time it looks like we might have some correct data. So let's go ahead and go down the folder hierarchy till we get to the data. There's our data. Download as. Okay, let's see what we got. And there we go. All our data has been converted. So 310, 310, 59, 306. There's our converted data. And so what we've done is we created a Kinesis Firehose stream that takes raw data in either Fahrenheit or Celsius, and has a transformation function that transforms the data from Fahrenheit or Celsius to Kelvin, and then outputs the data to an S3 bucket that we can then use in future processing. So that's how Kinesis Firehose works. Pretty easy and pretty cool.